Online banking, of course, is not new. The technology has been around about a quarter of a century. But as the technology evolves and gets more expensive, bankers around here and elsewhere are trying to grapple with keeping up with customers' expectations about online banking while making sure the process doesn't get too expensive for them. Mark Murphy is the editor of the Providence Business News. The cover story in the current edition of the paper is all about this. And I didn't realize it was this complicated till I read what was going on. There's a lot going on that they have to keep up with.
Yeah, it's not just expensive, it's extensive, right? I mean, you know, for those of us old enough to remember when ATMs showed up in the 80s, it's way past that. I mean, you know, so many people are now doing their banking mobily. In fact, you have, you know, national groups talking about you can get your mortgage approved just on your phone. And so those kinds of options are making people more receptive and demanding of what a bank can offer.
Some of the bankers quoted here say that, yeah, they want to keep up with the latest, but they don't want to grab onto some new technology and invest a lot in it because maybe 6 months, a year later, it's dated and they have to replace it all over again.
Well, and there's a real difference between the big banks. I mean, you look at a bank like Bank of America. It's huge, many assets, much income. It can develop its own products and in a sense keep up more easily. The smaller community banks, it's harder, more difficult for them. They don't have the budget to do that. So they have to use outside vendors, and the problem is, you know, exactly what you talk about. When will it be obsolete? But also, is it really serving their, their customers? And
aside from a few huge banks that operate here, it's mostly these smaller banks that have to keep up. And then they have to worry about cybersecurity.
Well, you know, banks are dealing with that anyway. I mean, they're guarding your money, so that's very important. But once you start creating more points of access from phones, from tablets, from, you know, much less home networks on a computer, I mean, those things are all, red flags for cybersecurity. So they have to be very careful with what they're doing at the same time as making it, available and convenient for what people want.
And you've already started to reference this, but these banks also have to contend with competition from what we call other than banks, fintech, which is short for?
Well, financial technology. But yeah, I mean, and so a lot of banks they're partnering with these folks. So it's a plug and play kind of thing. So they're bringing them into their network because these other, non-banks are already out there and they're already operating. I mean, Venmo is one thing where you can, from your phone, transfer money to someone else's account just like that. Well, that gets that takes money out of a bank's hands. And so they're trying to work on this very issue: is how do you integrate these people without driving them somewhere else, making it convenient and not breaking your own bank in the process.
Yeah, and you wonder why the banks are slow to increase their interest rates on CDs and stuff with the improving economy and with the Fed raising rates. Well, that's maybe part of it. They've got more expenses, and there's a lot more about it. Banking on Technology, cover story in the current edition of the Providence Business News. Mark Murphy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Frank.